From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Our connection this hour was made with three major developments in the search for alien life. It started back in April when scientists announced that thanks to NASA's James Webb Space Telescope, they had discovered a potential signature of biological life on a distant planet. This is exactly how many scientists believe we will eventually discover alien life, maybe even technologically civilized alien life. You look for evidence in the atmosphere of planets, the same kinds of signatures that humans give off here on Earth with our technology. And for a little while in April, it seemed like we had found it. Now, the planet is K218b. It looked like a water world teeming with life. Then scientists do what scientists do. They took a closer look and then took those claims apart. Then things got really weird a few months later. Scientists revealed that a new interstellar object was under observation, an object called 3I Atlas. If it's not an asteroid and it's not a comet, and it came from a different solar system, what exactly is it? Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb raised the possibility that 3I Atlas is a piece of extraterrestrial technology sent to spy on our planet by an advanced civilization. Loeb says he's intrigued by the dark forest hypothesis, which holds that advanced aliens are trying to hide from one another because they don't want to be attacked. In the dark forest scenario, the universe is filled with alien civilizations, and now Loeb says we might be seeing evidence of it with 3I Atlas. Once again, scientists pumped the brakes, chastising Loeb for being that weird alien guy who looks less like a scientist and more like Cliff Clavin in the age of Reddit. But here's perhaps the strangest thing of all. Amidst the flurry of new data or new ideas or new images to study, the United States is deciding to scale back its effort to lead the world in this field. Writing for The Atlantic, astrophysicist Adam Frank says, quote, "The U.S. Space Agency is facing a funding and personnel crisis that the Planetary Society has called an extinction-level event. The Trump administration's proposed 2026 budget, a version of which passed Congress, slashes NASA's funding by almost a quarter. That means, adjusted for inflation, NASA would get the same level of funding it had in 1961, before JFK called for the United States to put a man on the moon," end quote. With apologies to Avi Loeb, Adam Frank has become perhaps the most sober and careful scientific voice in the search for alien life. He wrote the Little Book of Aliens. He updated an equation designed to help us understand how likely it is that little green men are out there. But Frank is not glib about evaluating the evidence, and now he worries that the serious part of the field that does this is going to suffer. I've been enjoying Adam Frank's new newsletter called The Everyman's Universe. I highly recommend that listeners subscribe to it. And I've convinced him to come back in and talk about what's happening in space and why the United States is retreating from a leadership position. Dr. Adam Frank, author, and Helen F. and Fred H. Gowen, professor in the Department of Physics and Astronomy at the University of Rochester. Welcome back to the program.
It's great to be back, Evan.
Is it great? I mean, are you an optimist today?
Optimist about what?
I don't know, anything. But how about space?
Science will march on. This is an incredibly exciting time in astrophysics. But what I'm worrying about is that won't be the United States that's at the lead anymore. That's what that article was about. We're ceding our leadership to somebody else.
So right from the start here, I'd mentioned to Adam that this morning, when we teased this program, I got an email, and let's see if I can find it, that I want to address because it's important to understand why Dr. Frank feels that NASA is so important as a leader. And this is an email from Alan who says, "Private companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin are filling the role of what NASA used to do. Fear not, the space race is not over, but we don't need NASA to lead it anymore. Times are changing."
Yeah, so I am a huge fan of commercial space ventures. They are actually an important part of sort of building the human infrastructure in space. I think if we can get through things like climate change, et cetera, then the solar system, is the future. But I think that comment really deeply misunderstands what commercial space does and what NASA does. Elon Musk has shown zero interest in, say, building space telescopes. He's shown zero interest in sending, we're sending a helicopter to the moon, Saturn's moon Titan, which has a thick methane atmosphere.
We're sending a helicopter?
We're sending a helicopter. NASA's sending
Saturn's
a helicopter.
Moon?
Yeah. Elon Musk is interested in what Elon Musk is interested in, and it's not basic science. Elon Musk is an industrialist and views space from an industrialist perspective. He's got that kind of wacky idea that we're going to have cities on Mars in 20 years, which is a fantasy for anybody who understands what Mars is like. Not that, we might not have cities on Mars in 200 or 300 years, but that's the timescale. But there's just, NASA is not just about getting things into orbit or even getting things to the moon. It's about investigating the universe itself. There's no one else who's shown any interest in doing that in the commercial space venture. Not Blue Origin, no one. So that's a different part of NASA and where NASA has led. And in some sense, we haven't had human beings on the moon since 72, 73. So human space flight has been kind of stalled. Meanwhile, NASA has sent probes to every kind of thing in the solar system. We visited every planet. We visited comets. We visit asteroids. That is not something that the commercial space ventures are going to do.
And if NASA, and we're going to talk about the cuts to NASA, if NASA is gutted or scaled back, China's going to beat us, right?
Oh, yeah.
Someone else is going to beat us.
Yeah. So, for example, when it comes to thinking about looking for life on other planets, particularly exoplanets, distant planets, you need to build a very special kind of telescope to do this. And that was in the books. NASA was already getting started in doing the design work for what will be called the Habitable World Observatory. It will be what replaces the JWST. It would be the most incredible, powerful piece of technology we ever built. It's going to take 20 years to build. And already that got scaled back in this grant. Scaled back so much that it really puts in danger the work you need to build this. China has already announced that they're building, versions of telescopes that are needed to find exoplanets. China's not stepping back at all, while we are profoundly stepping back. And there's also Europe as well. The European Space Agency has its own stuff going on. And so as this, the chaos that has been forced on American science over the last 6 months, 8 months, as that plays out, other countries are looking at us and being like, ooh, we'll take your best people.
And they are. 4,000 people have already left NASA, from what I'm reading, either taking sort of early retirements or resigning their positions, some leaving the field and retiring, some looking elsewhere. Some
going elsewhere. So, I have a lot of friends at NASA, and the morale there, it's really... It's difficult to talk to them, just hearing what they're going through. There's just the level of just sort of, of the disarray and the programs being canceled. And, the thing about losing people, about these early retirements that people didn't want to take, NASA does things that are so specialized that if you lose some of these people, you're never getting that knowledge back. A friend of mine was telling me about a meeting he was in, and they were discussing how to get, how to get space probes, through particular kinds of orbits to be able to get them to, the outer solar system. And somebody floated an idea, and there was an older gentleman who said, no, we tried that. We tried that in '83. It won't work, right? Now
he had the institutional knowledge.
He had the institutional knowledge
to help them work around and say, don't go this way, go that way.
Go that way. Because, landing a space probe on a distant planet is really hard.
Sending a helicopter to the moon of Saturn, which we're apparently actually doing.
Yeah, is super difficult. And, it requires huge amounts of experience. NASA's been doing this for a while. And this is, again, this sort of thing that SpaceX, those companies are not interested in this. They're not going to do it because they're so, especially, you think about someone like Elon Musk, who's just sort of like, we'll cut to the bone. If you're not, on mission, then, you're gone. This is the kind of thing that only something like NASA can do, that can have that kind of broad vision about, let's play with these ideas. Let's think about this. Let's think about that. And then you have this institutional memory of how to get these impossible things done.
Well, and what part of the conversation we had yesterday on this program about the change to civil service, how this administration is literally sending questionnaires on what did you think of January 6th? How did you vote? And we're not just talking about people who lead cabinets. We're talking about thousands of workers in civil society across sectors. And so in some places, if someone resigns or is fired, they can be hired back in the future and you can largely be okay. In others, if you lose that institutional knowledge, you may not get it back. And part of what you're describing with NASA is a deep loss, not just in where we are now, but in the kind of work that takes more than one presidential administration. I mean, how long did it take to get, Pluto's got that little heart-shaped lake thing that's like, look how, you see how very advanced I am in describing.
That's pretty good.
How long did it take for us to send?
That was 10 years.
Incredible.
But that was 10 years of travel time.
Of travel time.
And then there was probably another 10, 15, 20 years. So that's the
of
thing.
Funding,
science,
building, planning.
Science requires, to be at the cutting edge of science, as the United States has been since World War II, requires an investment, continuous investment, not only in the projects, right? You decide we're going here. We're going to build this kind of telescope. We know it's going to take us 20 years, but we're starting now. But it also requires investing in the people who are going to build those. One of the things that is happening now is you're losing the young people because there's no funding for them, so that you're going to lose a whole generation of young scientists. And then what's happening also because of the way some of the immigration stuff is hitting the science community is that we're going to lose the young people who wanted to come here. I mean, one of the reasons the United States is a powerhouse in science is that everybody, the smartest people around the world, came here to do their work. They didn't go somewhere else. And the more chaos there is, the less, and with the combined with the funding, those people are going to be like, no, we're going somewhere else. I'll take that postdoc in Germany at the Max Planck Institute. I'm not going to take it in the United States.
Well, I think sometimes there's this idea that inertia will just prevail and that we'll dominate. We're number one. We're number one in everything. We're a superpower. And I know you've made this point before. I think it bears understanding again. If you look throughout history, the leader in science has not always been the same country and the same people.
God, not at all. Right. If so it's 1600 and you're a young person coming up and you want to be where the best science was, right? You went to Italy because, that's where Galileo was. That's where all these laboratories were, emerging. In 1750, you didn't go to Italy. Italy had passed by. Italy's time as a scientific leader had passed by. In 1900, if you wanted to go where the best science was and learn from the best people, you went to Germany. Germany was the place where the cutting edge of science was. In 1960, you didn't go to Germany, right? So, history shows this multiple times. Countries lose their scientific preeminence, usually for their own fault, their own reasons. And it is very hard not to see that we're not in the middle of the greatest self-own in history. That why we are messing with science, right? The amazing infrastructure that the U.S. built after World War II, the mix of government research labs, university research, over and over again, it produced profound wealth. Profound national security advances. Something like as simple as the internet, right? The internet was built by government labs. The first, university connections that all came out of university research in computer science, laboratory research in computer science. When I was a graduate student in the 80s, we were using this crazy thing called NSF-net, right? Where you could send messages across this network. And it was, and then a few years later, the internet went, by 92, it was starting to go public. So, how much money was made by that crazy thing called the internet, right? So, the idea, the chaos that's being created, I'm not sure we're going to get over it. And other countries will be happy to take the lead because, the nation that is at the forefront of science is the nation that leads the world.
Talking to Dr. Adam Frank, astrophysicist at the University of Rochester, and we're talking about some of his recent writing about cuts at NASA, and not just cuts at NASA, but what it means to see a scientific establishment, so to speak, eroded intentionally, and what it means for established scientists, young scientists, future scientists, what it means for the United States' position in the world. Our volunteer, Gary, sends me a note. The Titan space probe is called Dragonfly. It's supposed to be launched in July of 2028.
Yeah, hopefully that one will still go. Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Who knows, right?
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is at least at my last reading, that probe we were talking about that went to Pluto, the New Horizons, which took 10 years to get there and is still now sailing out beyond Pluto into the Kuiper Belt and, is still taking data. The plan was to turn it off. Just turn it off.
Whose plan?
That was under the Trump budget, and I'm not really sure what the status is now with but they're going to turn off a whole bunch of these missions that are out there.
Your piece hits on a couple of these points, because this really helps us understand what we are considering actually doing, which I couldn't really believe reading your piece. So you mentioned New Horizons takes about 10 years to reach Pluto after it launches, but that's a great point. Now it's just out there flying in uncharted space at the edge of our solar system, collecting interesting data,
still taking data.
And it's taken generations of work to get this thing out there.
Right. And let's just turn it off because I don't even know. The amount of money you save by turning it off is like, in the lower decimal places of the national budget. It doesn't. What are you saving compared to?
Turn it off.
So let me tell you actually a really interesting result that just came from New Horizons. So New Horizons is now so far out in the solar system, past the edge, or in the outer, getting the outer solar system, that they were able to do is they took, and it's got a camera, an accurate enough camera on it, that they were able to take pictures of the stars, and then by comparing them to pictures of the stars that we take on Earth, they look a little different because now you're looking from a different point of view. And I read a paper where this team was saying, look, this shows us that we could do interstellar travel, right? Interstellar navigation, you're going to sail, 50 light years through space. How do you know you're going to get where you want to go? You have to have some kind of navigation. You have to be able to know where you are. And so this ability to sort of track we're seeing the stars change as we move along, there's a whole science that has to be developed there. And here, New Horizons was taking pictures and saying, oh, look, here, we can figure out how to do it. And now it's like, no, we're turning that switch off. Just turn it off. We don't need that.
Listeners, if you want to join the conversation, it's 844-295-TALK. It's toll free, 844-295-8255. 263-WXXI if you're in Rochester, 263-9994. You can email the program connections@wxxi.org. Before I get to John on the phone, a different John emails to say, aren't we building a nuclear reactor on the moon? I actually don't know what the state of... Do you know much about that? Trump has talked about that.
There's plans. NASA has had plans.
I don't know what that's about, though.
I'm not really sure exactly. I mean, they're part of the Artemis program is to have a permanent base on the moon, and the idea of having a nuclear, that's fine. It's a good place to put a nuclear reactor.
Okay.
But it would power, because you need to have continuous power on the moon. I'm not sure that why you'd necessarily need a nuclear reactor. Then solar wouldn't do it for you. But yeah, I think that would be a good idea to have a base on the moon and have it powered by a nuclear reactor.
You write that Juno, which is revolutionizing astronomers' understanding of Jupiter and could help them understand similarly monstrous worlds in other solar systems with other Earth-like planets, could get discontinued?
Yeah, that's another one, and we have to see what the status of that is now. But there's a fleet of spacecraft. This is the amazing thing about NASA missions. NASA, and we should compare this again with sort of the idea about what commercial space would do. NASA gives these missions, says okay, the timeline for this mission is 6 months. That's what they want to get out of it. But almost always, because NASA's engineering is so incredible, they can last 10 years, right? Those rovers that we sent to Mars that have been wandering around Mars for decades, most of those had, the official lifetime was 6 months. But because they're so well built, they just keep going and keep getting us new data and discovering new amazing things, like that Mars used to be a blue planet. There used to be, oceans, or at least, giant lakes on Mars. So, we spent all this money, billions of dollars, to send them out there. And then the idea we're just going to turn them off it makes no sense.
You also write about the Habitable Worlds Observatory. Slated to launch, this is farther out, sometime in the 2040s.
This is the big one, right? This is the one that's going to take 20 years.
HWO is planned to be about the same size as James Webb Space Telescope, with a similar orbit beyond the moon. And this is meant to do what? Help us find what?
It's help us find life in the universe. So the idea, so we've made such incredible progress over just the last 10 years in figuring out how to find life on other planets. It's a remarkable moment in human history. So, just to go take a few steps backward, this question of are we alone is like the oldest question around. To the Greeks 2,500 years ago, you can see the Greeks yelling at each other about it. And it's only been in the last few decades that we figured out first that there are other planets orbiting other stars. That was also an ancient question. We didn't know, maybe the solar system was the only one there was. Maybe planets were very hard to make. In which case, you don't know. You'd have to go through 1 billion stars before you found one that had a family of worlds. Now we know that every star in the sky has planets orbiting it. But even more than that, now we've developed the technology to be able to see into the atmospheres of these planets, even though they're like 100 light years away. And when we get the light that comes from the atmosphere, we can look for the fingerprints of different kinds of compounds, what's in the atmosphere. And so we call this atmospheric characterization. And what's amazing about life is life changes atmospheres, right? So the only reason there's oxygen in our atmosphere, in Earth's atmosphere, is because life put it there. It was basically farted out by bacteria.
Scientific term.
Yes, it is. That's a very technical term. And so, if you were to look at a distant planet and see oxygen in its atmosphere, which we, could do, you would have a pretty strong case that there was a biosphere there. Right. And so this capacity to see into the atmospheres of distant worlds and be able to tell whether there's oxygen, whether there's methane, whether there's dimethyl sulfide, which is a compound that seaweed produces. That's a revolution. And so we're just like the James Webb is kind of just at the hairy edge of being able to do that. So we want to build the Habitable Worlds Observatory because that telescope will be tuned to be able to do this. And it's going to require all kinds of new technologies to be developed. And that is why you need 20 years. It's going to take 20 years to develop all these technologies. And we're stumbling. The new budget cuts Habitable Worlds Observatory, research back. And other countries they're going to pick up in our absence.
I mean, Trump will be in his 7th term or so by the 2040s when this thing is set to launch. China has something very similar that they are trying to do pretty aggressively, aren't they?
China in general. So right now, China has already announced that they're going to be they're planning on building a planet finder, something that is just going to be very good at finding planets, characterizing planets. We don't know yet whether they have something in mind like something of the scale of the Habitable Worlds Observatory. But the interesting thing about the Chinese space program is they often are just like, look what we just launched.
They're not telling you in advance?
They're not telling you in advance. There's lots of times where China just says, hey, look, we got a space station. Surprise! So it's not clear what China, but we know that China is investing, is putting a lot of money.
And we know if we stand still,
somebody else takes.
We're getting past.
Right.
We're getting past. So on the subject of the search for life, I do want to go back to your friend Avi Loeb. Is it all right that I described him as like Cliff Clavin in the Age of Reddit?
Well, Avi is
he's an actual astrophysicist.
He is.
At Harvard.
He's a Harvard astrophysicist. That's what you see in all these news stories. Harvard astrophysicist,
which is has the stamp
aliens on their way. Yeah. Yeah. What they don't say is all the other Harvard astrophysicists think he's wrong.
He's not conspiracy guy.
No,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on Twitter.
I know.
So what has happened to him?
I don't know. So I know Avi. He's a great guy. He's done brilliant work in the past. He is a generous person. But I don't know. All of us in the field. He was one of the guys who really did some great work early on in this field of techno-signatures, how to, find signatures, not just of life, but of technological life. But at some point, he just started, making claims about data that were just everybody else, all the other scientists thought was just unsupportable. And then he, doubled down on them. And then the media cascade followed him. That he just, did he get blinded by the lights of being in the media? Because
he's the alien guy. Everything is aliens.
Everything is aliens, and this new object. So let's talk about.
I say new object, new to me, but
no, it is. It's new to us.
Okay, so tell us what the object is.
So 3I Atlas. Yes. So what is the I stand? So 3 means it's the third time we've seen one of these. I is interstellar object, right? There's only been the first one was a Oumuamua, and that's where sort of Professor Loeb got his sort of emerged as the alien guy. This is only the third time that we've seen something passing through the solar system, right? Not in orbit around the sun. It's coming from another solar system. And we expected this for a long time because we know that things like comets and asteroids are kind of loosely connected to the sun. And when two stars pass each other, even if they're, half a light year away, it creates a gravitational tug that can just spray comets out into space. So we always expected that comets and asteroids, which are basically giant mountains, flying mountains in space, that there should be these rogue, asteroids wandering around. And every now and then, one of them should just wander by and get caught briefly or have its path changed by the gravity of the sun. So we would expected this would happen. So the first one was Oumuamua, and so that was one eye / Oumuamua. Then there was 2-eye Borisov. I'm not really sure what it's. And now there's 3-eye Atlas. Yeah. The name often is is who discovered it or the telescope that discovered it. So with Oumuamua, there were things about it that were different, or that didn't behave necessarily like we expected, which is fine because it's new. It's the first time we've seen anything like this. It
doesn't mean it's not a natural object.
It doesn't mean it's not a natural object. And so, Professor Loeb did this whole thing that, where he proposed, which is fine. He proposed, hey, this could be an alien artifact. And that's great. I'm all about that. Let's propose it. And now let's go through the list of possibilities. And, is there a better explanation? Right? That's always the question. Is there a better explanation, a natural explanation, things we do understand that it could be? And with Oumuamua, it turned out, after it took a while, that, there were better explanations. But Professor Loeb just doubled down on that. And the worst part for everybody in the astronomical community is Avi Loeb is not a comet guy. He spent his whole life doing early universe, black holes. He did great work in that. But there's all these people who study comets, deeply, and they were like, Avi, you're wrong. This thing you're saying about what comets do or what you'd expect, you're wrong. That's not the way comets behave. And he just didn't listen to him. He just kept saying what he was saying. And now this new one, 3-eye Atlas, is really behaving like a comet. It's really
probably just a comet.
But there's still cool new things about it, like the distribution, how much water it has, and the kind of water it has compared is different. It's different from what we've seen from comets around the sun, which is awesome, right? We're learning something.
You're saying that's cool enough.
Oh my God, that's cool enough.
But what he's saying is it's different enough that we should be prepared for assuming that this is a piece of alien technology designed to look like a comet that is spying on Earth.
And the worst part about this is, and this is where it comes down to responsibility, right? Scientists, as someone who communicates science to the public, you always have a responsibility to sort of tell people how science works, how science reaches its conclusions, that, your pet theory may, it's your pet theory, but that's not the community's pet theory. And especially something like this, right? Aliens, everybody loves aliens.
Yeah,
Everybody's interested in it.
Yeah.
There's so much misinformation that as a scientist, you really have a responsibility to be very clear about what's known and what's not known. And what Professor Loeb is doing, he's got a newsletter. Substack, Medium, where he's just throwing out, these are not scientific papers that have been peer reviewed where other people looked at his ideas and said, hey, we're challenging you on this. If you can't show us, you can't prove to us this thing you're saying, then this paper won't get published. It's not going to be part of the scientific literature. He's just throwing ideas out on, Medium that then get picked up. Harvard astronomer says, alien spacecraft disguised as comet, so it's just it is very frustrating for us. And I think it's not good for the public discourse about science and about this amazing question of life in the universe.
But it's one reason that you want funding to continue, you want support to continue for the real research that can answer these questions, because you do think eventually we may make such discoveries, but we're not there yet.
Right.
And we don't have the evidence yet. And just as a way of kind of getting your head around the scope of this, here's what we're going to do. In a minute, we're going to take a break, and then I've got some really good questions from listeners for Dr. Frank. And then I want to talk to him a little bit about his new newsletter, which everybody should be subscribing to, because it's so good. It's so fun.
You. I'm having so much fun. I am having so much fun. Right.
When I found out you were doing it, I was like, oh, you're not going to be able to sustain this. Come on. And then I'm like, oh, this is really good. I really enjoyed this. You're doing it. But I just want to tell you something that I think I want the audience to think about this too. I had a conversation this summer with a 13-year-old kid that I coach in baseball. And he's a really nice kid. And he and my son were playing this game where you try to figure out crazy numbers and stuff. So it's how many grains of sand are in a cup? In one cup.
Right.
And, it's ridiculous stuff like that. And so the question was, if you could get on the fastest rocket ever made by humans and go in a straight line to the nearest star system and not stop, how long would it take you to get there?
A couple 100,000 years.
So this guy, this 13-year-old, his name's Evan, a great kid, I love him. He said, and this, I thought this was a reasonable answer. He really thought about it, and he said, 5 days.
We wish.
And the answer was minimum 80,000 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's assuming the fastest of the fastest rockets. It's probably more like 100 to 200,000 years. Exactly. I'm not surprised that you knew this. Minimum 80,000 years, nonstop.
Yeah.
Just to like the nearest neighbor.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how big.
That's how big
and vast.
space is.
And
yeah.
that's wild.
That's
for
like
all of us.
and then like you said, that is literally your next door neighbor. That's not the Starbucks down the street or the grocery store. That is like literally, you're going to go over and like borrow their tools because they're right next door. So yeah, space is, and that's what people really have to understand when we think about, the possibilities of space travel and everything. Space travel, interstellar travel may be very, very difficult. It may not really be possible to build interstellar civilizations. Maybe it will. I mean, that'd be awesome. I'm just saying, like, when you realize how big space is and that finite speed of light that you can't, right? As far as we know right now, nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. It really may be a universe where, solar systems can be densely populated,
and
but interstellar travel.
I share that story because I actually don't think it's a bad guess for a 13-year-old because we just haven't gotten our heads around how big the bigness of this.
Right.
But I also share it to say, if we have already had success with New Horizons and Juno and all these things that are happening or in progress, why would you turn the lights off?
I know. No,
it is so hard to do this.
Yeah, yeah. And the fact that, like, again, like the technologies that we could develop to do things like, how about, all right, we're sending a helicopter to the Titan. How about sending a submarine? Because that's the only place in the solar system where there are lakes, but they're lakes of liquid methane. So, and there's a possibility that there's an entirely different kind of life that is formed in these things.
That is such a cool idea.
Somebody proposed this, though, submarine on Titan. And so, yeah, right, this just requires a kind of effort that's never going to happen with commercial space venture and a kind of long-term, you got to think 20, 30 years in the future. Commercial space ventures are always going to be thinking, much shorter timescales. So yeah, why would we turn out the lights? I don't know.
All right, let's get a little bit of listener feedback on the other side of our only break, and then we're going to talk about some of the good stuff that's filled up this the Everyman's Universe newsletter. Adam Frank is our guest here, an astrophysicist. We're having some fun talking about some dark stuff, some dark matters here on Connection. See what I did there?
That was good.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Ortolani Services, an insurance brokerage firm working to help individuals and small businesses navigate health insurance benefits planning, from contract workers to retirees to sole proprietors. More at ortservices.com.
This is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. All right, here's Claire in Brighton who says, I'm wondering what career advice Dr. Frank is giving his students right now. My son just got his doctorate in nuclear physics, but government nuclear labs are not hiring and postdoc positions are not being filled. I have to think this is affecting many early career scientists right now. Would love any advice.
Yeah, this is the tragedy. This is the tragedy that this is the real human cost of what's going on. The people who bright young Americans who want to go contribute to American science find themselves in kind of a desert. So my advice is to stay the course. Watch what happens. Hopefully this won't last, and that the funding levels, the it's more than the funding levels. It's the interest. It's the sane science policy will return as soon as possible. I mean, there has been some good news in Congress because it turned out that the people in Congress did recognize, like, oh yeah, having a vibrant scientific enterprise is good for American defense and American prosperity. So, like I said, for right now, I would say stay the course. I always tell my graduate students to have a plan B. Should always have a plan B, for industry or, because even, when I was coming up, there was a 1 in 100 chance that I would get with my Ph.D. a job at a university. So you always have to be flexible. But for right now, I'd say stay the course and let's hope that this doesn't continue.
The experience that Claire is describing, though, is pretty common right now.
Oh, it's really common. For young, I'm lucky that I'm 63. Right? because right now even as young, if I was a young professor, right, your career is built on your research. Your research is built on your ability to get funding to pay for other young scientists. Like, people think the money that have this or this idea that like scientists get grants and then they use it to buy Maseratis. They use it to fund students, right? They use it to fund the next generation of students to do the research. So,
David says. This is wildly beyond tragic, these insane cuts and gross, often deadly, anti-scientific decisions from this administration. He says he is listening sadly. But here's a different take. Dallas says, it's strange to hear a guy without a rocket ship, that's you, I assume, downplaying efforts of a guy who does. He's talking about Musk. And then he says, when it comes to the scientists who quit their jobs from NASA, if they were good, they would have been hired by Musk for more money than the government was paying. Just saying.
What you're saying is just entirely wrong. Musk is not hiring people who build, rovers for Mars. There's no, or using that. I mean, it just really, that profoundly misunderstands what kinds of technology go where. Musk is building rockets. He's not building space probes that go to other planets. They're a very big difference. And, the loss of those people, we will feel the loss of those people. I mean, if they were any good, they're the people who landed, they're the reason why you could launch something from Earth, have it go directly to Mars, and have it land within like 60 meters of where you pointed it. I think they were pretty good at their jobs.
I'm sorry, Dallas. I don't mean to be laughing, but like, I remember when we got the first images real close from of Pluto, and you started to see the detail of Pluto, of freaking Pluto. And I'm going, we sent something that's the size. What's the New Horizon? What's the size of that thing?
I'm not really sure. I bet it was probably a bus.
Yeah, I was like an oversized lawn chair flying through space, taking incredible pictures and sending them back to us. And it's taken years, and now we're going, these guys obviously weren't very good.
Yeah,
it's not like they're getting jobs elsewhere.
Yeah. No, listen. I have issues with Elon Musk for, various reasons. But, the guy's a brilliant technologist. And, SpaceX is they're building great rockets. They have lowered the cost of entry.
Nobody's saying he's not, smart or good at what he does. He's just not doing the same things
he's
that
not
NASA
doing.
is
There's
doing.
where's SpaceX's, space telescope? There's no plans for space. They have no
Because it's not
plans.
profitable.
Well, they're not interested in it.
Right.
It's not part of his plan. So if you want a space telescope, don't think that Elon Musk is going to build a space telescope, because there's hasn't shown any interest in it.
Oh, boy. Charlie says, Evan, the current administration's attitude towards science might be called hubris. I prefer ignorance and arrogance parading as common sense. The gutting of NASA is personally troublesome, as I was a child of the 60s being allowed to stay home to watch the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo launches. I remember the sense of pride throughout the country with every launch. I believe the current so-called leader of our country wishes his nose was longer so he couldn't see past it. I am just furious about the state of science and discovery here in the United States. It is embarrassing. That's from Charlie.
Well, I think what's really happening is, it's hard to describe. I mean, really, it's the passing of a torch. We're stepping back, and that's what is most upsetting to me. So I ended that article by saying, wherever I go in the world, I travel a lot for science, representing American science. And wherever I go in the world, I see people from those countries wearing two different kinds of American, American cultural artifacts. One is the Yankees cap, which makes me really angry, being a Mets fan. But the other is the NASA logo. Everywhere you go, people are wearing the NASA logo.
Around the world.
Right. And so you're not going to see this. You're not going to see this change tomorrow. But you will see this change in 10, 15 years when we're just not building this kind of stuff, where the young people who have the best ideas about space exploration, about building those, the space telescopes, are going to take jobs for the European Space Agency or for India or for China. And that NASA, we will have stepped back. If we step back, others are going to step forward. That is history.
And something just occurred to me with Dallas's comments about, if these people were any good, they'd be getting profitable jobs at SpaceX. I think I'm sure there is, this underlying idea And right now it's in what you would call conservative circles or the political right in this country, that if you work for government, you're just a waste, that you don't really offer anything. You just drain tax dollars. You're just a sponge. You don't offer anything for the public.
Right.
And what we need is mass downsizing. That's why Doge was cheered by many people at the start.
Right.
And what that ignores is, of course, there is waste somewhere. I mean, of course, government can be clumsy and inefficient. And of course, the private sector sometimes can move better and faster. Nobody disputes that. But this idea of we're just going to malign anybody who works for government as just not good enough to be in the private sector, when the reality is maybe they don't want to be in the private sector. Maybe they are phenomenal at what they do. Maybe the people who work in your national parks are awesome at what they do. Maybe you got great park rangers. Maybe you have phenomenal career agents in the FBI or the CIA who are being purged now. Maybe you've got incredible people at NASA who have the kind of institutional knowledge that can send a lawn chair to Pluto and take pictures that we can look at.
Right.
I mean, these are not people who are just a drain on the system. And there needs to be at least a little bit of a reframing or an understanding of what it means to be in civil service or working for the government.
Right. Well, especially when it comes to science, the return on investment, right? So whoever sent that email to you was using the internet and using computers and all of that, is intimate. None of that would have existed without the intimate connection with government-funded research. None of it would be there. You would not be able to type your message out and send it on your cell phone or something without the, So, that, like as I was saying before, this the government labs like NASA, but it's all the government labs. It's the NIH. It's as well as university-funded research is the return on investment. People have done this is like factors of 10. You put $1 in, you get $10 worth of vibrant businesses and jobs and national defense out of it. So that sort of view of like, oh, these guys are, they're not doing anything, just is such a profound misunderstanding of what has made America a superpower since World War II, that by misunderstanding that, you are sort of condemning us to not being, at the forefront of the world, especially when it comes to science. Because again, like I said, the country that leads in science is going to be the country that leads the world.
I got so much more feedback. I'm going to try to get as much as I can here. This is Bob in Mendon on the phone. Hey, Bob, go ahead.
Hi, actually, I'm calling because something said earlier needed to be repeated, and he just repeated it. The person who leads, the country that leads in science leads the world. The fact that we're pulling everything from research, from science, and it was just said recently by somebody in the administration, we need to stop believing the experts. That whole idea, I don't think people understand just how dangerous that is and where it's going to lead us.
Yeah, I completely agree. And this weird thing about expertise, right? It's like, everybody's an expert at their own life, right? Everybody is an expert in something, right? So, I actually had to call my furnace guy the other day, because my furnace is not working. And I always love when, the HVAC people come because, this is kind of applied physics and they know so much I don't know about how to actually move hot air around, and the degree of their expertise is phenomenal. And, if I said something to my HVAC guy, like, well, this probably requires, 60 feet of venting, and he'd look at me like, what did you just make that up? And this is what we find in public discourse in science. People saying like, because they don't want to listen to the experts, just saying ridiculous stuff. And the problem is nature doesn't care about your opinions, right? Nature doesn't care how you think, in general, all of us, what any of us think about the way nature works. Nature's just going to go ahead and do what it does. And so that's what I mean about paying the price. If we turn away from science, then not only will our stuff fail in, but also other countries' stuff will succeed.
Do a brief armchair psychologist real quick here, because Bob's saying he thinks this administration doesn't want us to lead in science anymore. John and Victor called in to ask, what does Adam think the reason is that Trump is doing this with NASA?
Yeah, it's hard. I don't know. I don't know, because this is such a, look, nobody needs to hear my opinion about politics, right? I mean, are you baffled
by it? Trump is a competitive person. He likes to win.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I don't understand. I don't understand this part. It just seems like, what the British would call bloody mindedness. everybody understands Republican governments, Democratic governments throughout history supported American science. They understood why, the value of American science. So I don't know what's going on, but it is short-sighted. It is so drastic that I have to be honest with you. I'm not sure we're going to recover. I hope we will, but I think there's been some damage done that may be long-term. But I don't honestly know. It doesn't make any kind of sense. There's no policy sense that you can ascribe to this.
On YouTube, Greg in San Diego wanted to know, how many Earth days does it take to get to the planet Mars going one way?
Yeah, so that's interesting. We were just talking about this before. The way we use rockets right now is that, fuel is so hard to come by. You got to launch the fuel that you're going to use to get you wherever you're going. So what we kind of do is we just turn the rocket motors on briefly and then coast until we get to Mars, and then turn the rocket motors on to brake. So now it can take 9, depending on where Mars and Earth are, they're always moving around the solar system. It can take 9 months or more. But if we could develop rockets, like nuclear-powered rockets, where you could continually accelerate, you basically have your engines on, accelerating at 1G, half the way there, turn the rocket around, and then decelerate, you could probably get there in weeks. Months, a month probably.
All right, since we got about 5 minutes left, here's what we're going to do. We're going to speed round through your newsletter, stuff that stood out to me.
Okay.
But where can people find your new newsletter? It's so good.
Everymansuniverse.com subscribe, or everymansuniverse.com. No apostrophe.
Listeners, it's really fun. It's funny. There's a great picture of you as a superhero.
Love that picture.
Did you draw that?
My friend designed that. I was like...
You drawing pictures of yourself as a superhero? Every Man's Universe. Okay, there's only one true bipartisan issue left. Cell phones in schools. You're a professor. Are you good with taking cell phones out of the classroom?
The first thing, I'm going to be teaching in an hour, and I do not let my students use no open computer, unless you have a medical reason. No computers open, no cell phones. Come back here. And I try and make my classes as interactive as possible. But yeah, no way.
So this is a case where we can get both parties together.
Yeah.
Look, we did it. We found something.
Yay!
Was Andor snubbed by the Emmys?
Yes! Oh, my God, don't even get me started. How much time do we have left? Andor, the greatest Star Wars ever made.
Andor's the best?
It's one of the best. I mean, the first movie is still the greatest Star Wars ever made. And the second movie was pretty great. But, I have not been a big fan of a lot of the movies that came afterwards. I mean, I'm so sick of the Skywalkers, and their saga.
And you want other stuff?
I want the Star Wars universe is so rich and interesting. Andor was just so well done, the performances. And, it was about the rise of totalitarianism. It was about the rise of the empire. It was just phenomenal. I mean, I loved The Mandalorian. That was a great show. But yeah, I mean, Andor was at the level, as people have called it, it's adult Star Wars. There's no cute teddy bears. There's no, and the performances in it were just stunning. There are these certain, scenes that, have bounced around the internet just because of what great acting it was. So yeah. What the heck,
Andor
man?
got snubbed. We'll do a whole hour on Andor.
Yeah.
You write that Mars is for losers. Here's our real future in space. And you're right. You're being cheeky. Mars is not for losers.
Mars is not for losers.
You respect the people, including SpaceX, who have ideas about it. But our real future in space may not be developing colonies on Mars. It might be on asteroids.
Spinning up asteroids, hollowing out asteroids.
This is so wild.
Spinning them up and building basically cities that could be the size of Manhattan, because the problem with Mars, with any planet, is that it's a gravity well. You gotta, you need a rocket to land safely, not crash land on it, and then you need a rocket to get back up. But with an asteroid, if you have the technologies to sort of process the asteroid material. And we actually did a paper at the University of Rochester, a whole bunch of us, where we showed how this might actually be done. And that's what I was talking about in that thing. That, yeah, you could basically use asteroids to build space cities that would rotate at a rate where you'd feel gravity and everything. And imagine 100,000 of these in the future, each one having, 1 million people. You'd have a pretty large population in space.
Do you think there's a greater chance that 200 years from now, there's people living on Mars or people living on an asteroid?
I think both will be. I think people will explain.
What's going to happen first?
I think probably Mars. I think probably we'll do Mars first. But long term, I would bet that asteroids there could be a lot.
Where's the better quality of life going to be?
Asteroids.
On the asteroids.
Because you can't terraform Mars, right? Or you can, but it would take thousands of years. This is why, Elon Musk's thing, if we want to criticize Elon Musk, his thing about like Mars is plan B. Mars is going to we can build stuff on bases on Mars. I'm all for it. But, Mars is still going to be a frozen hell. And you're going to have to live underground. You have to live underground on Mars. Whereas, like, on these space habitats, you could actually have, like, really parks and, really nice living. If
listeners want to learn more about living on an asteroid, there is a great science fiction series that Adam consulted on. What's it called?
The Expanse.
Still worth seeing.
I wrote about it a lot. I talked to those guys. I wish I'd consulted.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm giving you too much credit. But you really liked it.
I love it.
Okay.
I'm reading the books again right now and enjoying it.
I'd still like to live on Earth in the future. That would be my preference.
I'd want to live in space. Give me a rotating asteroid any day.
Okay. All right. Good luck to you. Dr. Adam Frank, author and the Helen F. and Fred H. Gowen Professor in the Department of Physics and Astronomy at the University of Rochester, author of The Everyman's Universe. It is so good. Subscribe to that. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure, as always.
Thank you for being here. More Connections coming up in a moment.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.